And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. When the Wilderness Committee was founded in British Columbia in 1980, there was little information available to the public on Canadian wilderness and wildlife issues. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1990.
The Western Canada Wilderness Committee store and office in Vancouver is always brimming with merchandise and volunteers. What started in 1980 as a campaign to sell calendars featuring threatened wilderness areas around the province has exploded into a full-time environmental movement.
It's this last 3 years, it has changed. It really has. We really pounded the pavement the first few years. You know, we had stacks of these calendars. We printed 10,000 and we'd sell maybe 7, and we'd have 3,000 we'd try to get rid of, and you know, there just wasn't the interest. I'd go all summer, you know, in different expeditions and come back and there'd be only that much mail, you know, after a whole summer. Here, if you left it for a whole summer, you'd fill up this whole room with mail. I mean, literally every day there's a chunk like that.
The Wilderness Committee has fought for preservation of many areas over the past decade, including South Moresby in the Queen Charlotte Islands, Mears Island off the west coast of Vancouver Island, the Stein Valley in southwestern BC, and Carmanah Valley on Vancouver Island, home to some of Canada's tallest trees, and recently made a provincial park.
I was sort of afraid it would divert us from other areas because it was so small, and I had no idea it was going to take off like that. I think that the big win there was getting the right to build the trails in there. The company recognized rightly that if we got people in to see how beautiful it was, there'd be no way they'd ever log those forests to those stands of trees.
The Wilderness Committee now has over 20,000 members, and it's growing every day. And although there appears to be enough wilderness disputes to keep this environmental group busy for some time, George says he sees an end to the fight.
I'm not going to spend my life fighting over saving postage stamp size areas because they don't work as benchmarks or ecological reserves. You need these larger wilderness areas. So I'd say 10 years. By the year 2000, 2001, we'll know what kind of planet we have.
Lawrence Scott doesn't have an army of volunteers to help him preserve and protect wilderness and wildlife in Saskatchewan, but he's still making a splash. He's received awards from the Canadian Wildlife Federation and the Governor-General's Conservation Award.
The basic problem facing all of our wildlife is the loss of habitat and the reduction of wildlife numbers resulting in endangered species such as burrowing owls and whooping cranes and what have you. So I see all of the wildlife groups really after the same thing, and I think it's better when we can work together, naturalist groups and hunter sportsman organizations, because when we lose our wildlife, we will have lost, everybody will have lost what they've been fighting for.
Concerns over loss of habitat is one of the reasons Scott is against this project, the Raphael Dam. Construction on this mega project outside of Regina continues, but since its announcement in 1986, work has been stalled several times, due in part to the efforts of Lawrence Scott.
We have opposed the Raphael Alameda project because governments have refused to follow the existing environmental laws. We tried to work with government, the people involved with promoting the project, and we identified some concerns such as the potential loss of over 40,000 acres of upstream wetlands and the downstream impacts in North Dakota and whatnot. And we were basically told, well, you know, this project going ahead, you know, we approached them again, and they basically said, take a hike.
Scott's position over Raphael and other environmental issues has resulted in death threats and threats of job loss, but he says it'll take a lot more than that to stop him. Death threats and danger are almost regular occurrences for some of the faithful to one of the oldest and most influential environmental groups of all, Greenpeace.
Obviously, everyone's familiar with the whale campaign, and a lot of people don't realize that Greenpeace didn't start with whales. We started with nuclear disarmament, and that's an issue that we're still working on. One of our very first major victories was ending atmospheric testing by France in the South Pacific, and we're still working on the nuclear issue and making significant progress on the issue of warship visits to Vancouver and to British Columbia and Halifax as well.
When Stuart's not busy coordinating actions against visiting ships, she helps in the ongoing battle against toxic pollution from pulp and paper mills. Pulp mill problems aren't restricted to the coast. Greenpeace workers in Winnipeg are also battling a chlorine mill proposal in La Pas.
Manfor, the mill in Nepal, was sold last year in May of 1989 to Repap of Montreal Limited, and their proposal is that they will convert the existing mill, which produces unbleached paper products, to a bleach paper plant and build a new mill. They will be using a chlorine bleaching process. When you use chlorine in a bleaching process, you produce organochlorines. They don't occur naturally anywhere in nature. So nature has no way of dealing with them. It's ludicrous for Repap or any other company, for that matter, to say that this is the best available technology. It isn't the best available technology from an environmental perspective.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Historically, craft guilds were highly structured organizations that wielded great influence over its members and sometimes held significant political power. Let us return to the archives with Mary Lee of the Kitimat Quilters Guild.
Women started making them out of the need to keep their families warm, long before central heating. Because fabric was sometimes in short supply, small pieces were used, and women were able to recycle all their old clothes, curtains, and anything else they could lay their hands on. The effort that went into the making of the quilts was enormous, and some patterns have been used for more than 100 years.
This particular quilt is called a double wedding ring, and it's a magnificent example of piecing and quilt stitching. This would probably be made as a wedding gift or perhaps as a trousseau. A young lady would be preparing her hope chest or things that she would need when she would be married. And it's likely that all the fabrics used in the rings were recycled, so to speak, from other projects, dresses, curtains, any other fabrics that may have been around the house. Because at the time that these quilts were made in the late 1800s and early 1900s, thrift was one of the prevailing laws, and the ladies would use any fabric that they could get their hands on, and then they would be able to put the little tiny bits together. Even though they're just 2 inches by 1 inches, they're still useful. And the piecing is very intricate and precise to get the circles to meet and intertwine at the right places. And the quilt stitching here is what you might call echo stitching, and where the needlewoman would start by outlining the pattern and then repeat that line over and over again until the space was filled. So that is something that we call echo quilting, and it completely fills all the open spaces. There is also some detailed pattern stitching in the rings themselves, and it's not visible from the face, but if you look at the rear of the quilt, the intricacy of the stitching comes out. Try to make this visible. There is some star-type shapes or radiating sun-type shapes that appear on the back. Sometimes you have to examine the back of a quilt to fully appreciate the needlework involved.
With women putting so much energy into the quilts, it evolved into an art form.
Yes, that's right. Quilting definitely arose out of the utilitarian need for warmth. And then in the hours that the women would spend at their needlework and creating something for their families, the drive to make something of beauty or something that would be a memento for their family or would make some kind of a statement on behalf of the lady that made it, these patterns would emerge in her work.
This coverlet is about 130 years old and is made from rich taffetas and brocades. And one can just picture the occasions when the dresses were worn before ending up as a bed cover with a wonderful three-dimensional effect.
This one is called Baby Blocks Quilt, and if you examine the piece closely, the illusion is created and you'll start to see blocks coming out. The placement of the black is the instrument that creates the illusion of blocks. And if you look at it in different ways, there are different illusions that are created, but the blocks is the pattern that the needlewoman was trying to bring out the most.
In the Victorian era, many women had servants to do their housework, so they had time to show off their needlework skills. This type of quilt, called a crazy quilt, became all the rage.
Now, this was a perfect vehicle for a lady to express her artistic abilities and to, so to speak, show off her needle crafts.
The woman who made it added in some very personal touches, such as these line drawings of cats, owls, and some pictures that could have had family significance. Included in the exhibit is an unfinished embroidery done on top of small pieces of material joined together. The quality of the work is exquisite, and the woman who did it probably had a flower garden which inspired her to reproduce them in silk. And what could have produced this amazing piece of work?
I suggest that maybe this was her the vehicle for all her frustrations. If she was having a difficult time, maybe she just poured everything out in thread.
Quilting sometimes turned into a social affair as women got together for group projects. Members of the Kitimat Guild have been doing this for some years as they perfect their skills and learn from one another. And there could be no more beautiful setting than to sew away, surrounded by wonderful creations, both old and new. This signature quilt was probably done as a fundraising project or as a memento for a well-loved church member for a special occasion. Women have always used the objects and scenes around them as inspiration for the quilts. Modern quilters are no exception. This is a variation of the traditional log cabin design, made now to look like an apartment block with all the windows.
And of course we have the
And
door.
this quilter
Yes, the
has
door,
created
right in the
a
middle.
very
But it
unique
appealed to me
quilt.
right away. And of course with my job you see all these different things walking around, and so it was fairly easy to think of something to put in each window.
Yeah, you're used to walking past windows as you deliver the mail in Kitimat.
Well, after that I paid particular attention to what was in them because I was running out of ideas, and so I really had to start thinking about it.
And what do mail carriers see in all those windows as they pass by?
And the baby's mobile. And then, of course, the baby looking out the window. I don't know where Mother is at the time because he shouldn't be that so close. And the old Tiffany lamp. And this one with the bare light bulb and no fridge because he had to put his beer and his lettuce and his milk in the window to cool. So this one had no fridge in his. And the little red light, the lady of the evening. And this lady, I'm not sure what she had in mind. Either she doesn't realize the window's open or she was hoping for the best.
New methods make quilting easier nowadays to fit in with the lack of time that most women have to contend with. This star quilt was made with a quick assembly method.
This one's done in the strip piecing method, and what it is, you can see it right along here. You put about 2 or 3 inch strips together. I don't know if you can see it right there. And they're different lengths of material, and what you do is you have a template, which would be a 45-degree angle, and you place it on there, and it's faster to cut it than the old method, because the old method is each one of those would be cut separately, and then you'd have to sew it together. So this, you're a lot faster in the sewing of it and putting it together.
A bed cover made this way can be put together, ready for hand or machine quilting in a weekend. And modern fabrics can be used to create intricate designs more easily.
What this is a long piece of material, and there's another piece in here which would have been that one, and I cut out the pieces that I wanted out of the material to sew it for a border. And this one's pieced in here.
So you get this very intricate effect, very simply.
Yes.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The first recorded fall fair in BC was in Victoria in October of 1861. In 1910, the Provincial Agricultural Fairs Association was established. Let us return to the archives to bring you a highlight of the 1990 Skena Fall Fair.
This year's Skena Valley Fall Fair was yet another big success story. Once again, fairgoers flocked to the Thornhill Community Grounds over the Labor Day weekend to enjoy everything the fair offered. More people than ever attended the 1990 version of the fair, and that's impressed organizers.
This year was probably the best year we've ever had. Preliminary estimates are about 4,000 people, up about 20% from previous years.
Mel Rundell's been involved in the Skena Valley Fall Fair for the last 4 years. He believes last year's return of the logger sports really helped bring out the crowds. Most fairgoers seem to agree.
Most of the logging, all the, all the events and that's what I came here for.
How about the logger sports? Does anybody like the logger sports?
Yeah. Lots of fun.
You do?
I like the axe throwing.
Is that your favorite?
Mm-hmm. I like it when they go in the water with the logs and stand on it.
I noticed the logging sports here, the people are really attracted to that.
The logger sports has seen changes since last year. This year, over 20 events were held at the fair, including some for women and beginners. There was also a big focus on local entries.
It was nice that we had more local people out this year because, like we say, then there's someone that you can cheer for, someone out there you know, or your friends know, or you work for, or you work with.
But Paligan would still like to see more local entries. She's encouraging everyone from the terrace area to practice now so they're ready for next year.
As opposed to last year when we had 6 local terrace entries, this year we had 10. Next year I'm hoping for even more. Now that a lot of the people in the stands saw someone out there that they know that did it, and they think, well, I can do that, I'm going to try it next year, and I hope they do.
Out-of-town entries are also always welcome. Paligan says a few loggers from around the province always return to help make the logger sports a success. She says the show couldn't go on without their help.
We do need those out-of-town guys coming because they help some of our novice guys that aren't really sure what they're doing. They can give them tips on how to improve their technique and what they're doing, give them tips on what kind of saws or axes they should use to help them.
One of the minor problems people in the spectator stands had complained about was delays between events. Paligan says improvements will be made, so next year the delays are far and few between.
We'll have more timers so that we can get through things quicker. We know the order that we want our events to run in so that we can have everything set up so that when we go from one, we can have the next one ready immediately, so we can just go from one to the next and on. So that we should have fewer delays next year.
Once fairgoers had managed to see all of the logger sports, they had plenty of other things to do and see. There was music, there was shopping, and if a person got thirsty, another venue that saw a lot of people was the exhibit hall. That's where anything could be found. And of course, it was always in top form because competitors were vying for that all-important first prize. But apparently some things weren't in the best shape that they could have been, particularly produce.
This year we've had a real hot, dry summer, and different exhibitors I've talked to have said, yeah, they tried to get things together, but it's all matured about 2 weeks earlier this year than in previous. So they've had a tough time coming up with some decent produce to display this year.
Nonetheless, most of the fruits and vegetables in the exhibit hall were bigger and better than what most people are used to seeing in a grocery store. Take, for example, this pumpkin. That's something that would fill the entire window at Halloween. Plenty of other goodies filled the exhibit hall, too. Formal gowns decorated the walls, as did quilts and comforters. There was no shortage of jams and jellies, and there even was a woman spinning yarn.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Fall fairs have been a community tradition since the concept of agricultural fairs was brought to Canada. A familiar refrain for many people in British Columbia at this time of year was, "I'll see you at the fair." In this final segment of Open Connection, Bimbo and Bobo share how much they love their job.
Of course, when you go to a fair in a place like Terrace, you're bound to meet up with old friends and make new friends. These two fair workers were in charge of making friends, ensuring people had a good time.
We've been walking around talking to all the little kids and making balloon animals and face painting.
And how about you? What have you been doing?
Just basically the same thing as her. We make the balloon animals and sell the little kids' balloons and stuff like that.
A lot of little kids.
Bimbo and Bobo couldn't stop bragging about their jobs. They both really enjoy their work.
Well, I don't know. I guess it's just seeing all the people here and all the different stuff they do.
And what's the best part for you?
I don't know. I like walking around and handing out my balloons and stuff like that.
While those two clowns got to meet people, Skena MLA Dave Parker was busy keeping track of people. According to him, turnout was better on Sunday than Saturday. Parker manned an entrance booth during the fair. He also thinks the logger sports were a big attention getter, but he says the heavy horse pull packed the house too. He was right. Down at the grounds, it was standing room only. The idea of the heavy horse pull comes from the prairies. Farmers used to have horses haul loads of rocks off their land. The fair saw one special guest it wasn't expecting. The top fair critic of BC came to see how the Terrace area show stacked up to others around the province. Jerry Peterson is the president of the BC Association of Agricultural Fairs and Exhibitions. It's his job to travel to fairs around British Columbia and rate them. As far as he's concerned, the 20th annual Skena Valley Fall Fair gets an A.
And I think here in Terrace, you can be very proud of what you've done. You got a very nice fair here. Your organizers have worked hard, I can see, to put together a good entertainment. And from looking at the crowd and the people, I can see that they're enjoying it.
People did enjoy themselves, and that has made organizers proud. They've already begun working on next year's fall fair. Midway rides and games are something organizers would like to see added to the two-day fair. However, it's much too early to tell if that wish will come true. One thing is for sure, though, organizers are looking forward to next year's fair.
Next year, bigger and better things. Hopefully we can double what we've got this year.
But before we start thinking too seriously about next year, we can't forget about this year.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.